Welcome to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson sitting in this afternoon for CALive, our regular host. Cy's a little under the weather today, and happy to sit in. My normal position is fundraising director here at Catholic Answers. As much as I'd like to spend the next couple of hours talking to you about everything that we do and hopefully gaining some of your monetary support, which we always appreciate, and many of you are supporters indeed of this apostolate. We've got a couple of great hours of apologetics, evangelization, and we're going to talk a little psychology today as well. So hour two is one of your favorites for Open Forum, Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. And for hour one, we have Dr. Ray Guarendi. Tell you a little bit about Dr. Ray. Most of you know who this gentleman is, but he is, of course, the host of The Doctor Is In, heard each day on the EWTN network from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern. A clinical psychologist, Dr. Ray is the author of 17 books, including Discipline That Lasts a Lifetime, Jesus, the Master Psychologist, and Raising Upright Kids in an Upside-Down World. He and his wife, Randy, are the parents of 10 adopted children. In fact, his newest book is all about that experience. It is called Taught by 10. He is a great friend of us here at Catholic Answers. And if I said any more, he might just levitate right out of the studio, and you'd be stuck listening to me for the next hour. We don't want that. So without further ado, Dr. Ray Guarendi,
you're making me
welcome.
nervous. You're making me real nervous. You know why?
Why is that?
You said something about fundraising. I mean, I'm holding my wallet here during this whole show. I just thought I was coming for an interview, and you're going to hit me up for money.
We'll talk later about that, okay,
Yeah,
Dr. Ray?
I noticed this.
Well, you know, we don't charge, most guests, we don't charge them to be here, but you might be an exception, so just keep that in mind.
I talked to your big man, Chris Check.
Okay.
And I told him I'm going to charge you by the word for this interview.
Oh, okay. Well, does that mean you're going to charge me based on the questions that our listeners ask as well, or just what I say?
What I say.
Oh, what
that's
you say.
$3 right there.
Oh,
what
wow.
I say is $3 right there.
We better move along. So the topic today, is fatherhood, and this is something that certainly within Catholic families is very important. We have the model father of Saint Joseph, the father of Jesus, of course. A lot of great fathers are saints in the church. All of us fathers, you're a father, Dr. Ray, I'm a father myself, we're all or should be striving to be saints ourselves within our families and outside of our families as well. But give us a little perspective on fatherhood as you see it. And let me remind you of the number to call. So it is 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884 is the number to call. Let's fill up those phone lines for Dr. Ray. The topic today is fatherhood. Dr. Ray.
There's a nonsense notion that dominates families, fathers, mothers. That's the idea that if you have high standards, your kids are going to rebel. The higher your standards, the more the kids are going to resist them. They're going to look at the culture, and they're going to say, how can all those people be wrong and you be right? Mm-hmm. And that's what's happening nowadays. So fathers will say to me, all right, I can set the standards, but what can I do to have my children look at me not like I'm a Neanderthal against the reigning cultural mindset? And I said, there's something very big you can do. Be much more affectionate. Much more affectionate. Now, that's easy enough done, David, with a 4-year-old. Maybe an 8-year-old. But what about that 15-year-old? Mm-hmm. What about the teenager who says, hey, don't look at me out in public? Man, mm-hmm. Dad, I'm not going to pull your finger, you know? Don't talk to me out in public. And for heaven's sakes, don't touch me. My son, Peter, was 15, 16 when he started playing high school basketball. I would sit in the bleachers about 5 rows back. Watch the boys doing the stuff they did, you know, for pre-basketball, twapping each other with towels and everything. Mm-hmm. And I'd wait for the right time. And I'd go down on the floor. And I'd grab my son, and I'd hug him, and I'd kiss him. Mm. And I don't care. You could see the women, the men in that bleacher section looking like, oh, his son's going to kill him.
Did he really just do that?
Yeah, exactly. This guy's a lunatic.
Yeah.
And I said to my son, and okay, David, you've got to compensate for that embarrassing act. You got to be affirming, supportive. I said, Petey, try not to stink the joint out. You know, you got to just make him know that you're with him.
Yeah.
No, I hugged him and I gave him a big kiss. I said, I love you, son. And later I said, hey, Pete, does that embarrass you? And he said, Dad, I don't think it would matter if it did. And I said, you're right, because I'm going to do it anyway. And he told me later, David, he said a couple of his buddies came up to him and said, I wish my dad would do that.
How about that?
So that's the first lesson I want to give these guys.
Yep.
Do not accept the conditions of your teenager, boy, girl, saying, out in public, don't be affectionate. Don't tell me you love me. Don't touch me. Don't do. That's not going to happen. I'm Italian. I kiss you. It means something. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that's the first strong piece of advice I'd give men. You're going to have high standards. You better have one way of a lot of affection.
So there's just one quick gem from Dr. Ray. We are talking fatherhood today. The number to call is 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. And Dr. Ray, as the father of 10 children, big Catholic family, right? You mentioned one thing that was the aspect of affection, mm-hmm. Particularly with Petey. What were some other ways that you showed affection, or maybe even a little snippet from the book that you just wrote about how your kids taught you so much? What else comes to mind?
I have a big regret, David. I used to say my prayers at night in bed under the covers. Kids didn't know I was praying. Dad could have just been sleeping at 8 o'clock like he always does. They say that 40 is the new 60, 9 is the new midnight. And I wish I would have knelt by the bed and said my prayers so my kids could at least see their dad, their old man, saying his prayers. That's a tiny little thing, but I regret that. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with the survey that said, and I've seen 2 surveys like this. One is a little more toned down. It said, if both parents take the kids to church, about a 60-70% chance kids will stay in church as adults. Mm-hmm. If dad alone takes the kids to church, and this is going to touch on this call you got here from Jonathan coming up later. Yep. If dad alone takes them, it's still upwards of 60%. If mom alone takes them, it's 30.
Isn't that amazing?
So God's saying, hey, look, guys, step up.
Yeah.
Step up. There's something about that male influence.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Again, we are just getting started on a 1-hour-long conversation with Dr. Ray Guarendi. You know him from The Doctor Is In on EWTN Radio and all of the many books that he has written. We are talking fatherhood today. The number is 888-31-TRUTH, 888-318-7884. Let's go ahead and take our first break of the first hour, and we'll be right back after this.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Divine Intimacy Radio.
The greatest joy in my life is helping others to come to know Christ more fully. And there's no better light on this path, the path to deep union with God, than the wisdom of the saints. Talking about this daily on EWTN Radio is one of the great joys of my life.
Divine Intimacy Radio, Sunday, 6:30 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 11 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson sitting in for CALive. Today, we have a great friend of the apostolate here with us in studio, Dr. Ray Guarendi. You guys know him. Most of you know him well. He is a clinical psychologist and an all-around good guy. And we are talking about fatherhood today.
You don't know that. You do not know that,
I
David.
know you well enough,
No,
Dr. Ray.
this is not some false humility.
Yeah.
This is a psychological point. You've heard people say, listen.
I'm listening. Okay. I'm listening.
You've heard people say after a 15-minute conversation with someone for the first time, oh, nice guy, just a really good guy. Yeah. And I want to say, you don't know that. All you know is you had a 15-minute pleasant conversation. You listen to folks in media, and maybe perhaps they have sat at a table with some celebrity for 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Oh, she is a sweet person. She's just a great person. Now, that may be true, but you don't know that. And you really don't know if I'm a good guy. I mean, I could have this persona on radio or TV that looks okay, but if you ask my wife, she could say, no, he's a jerk.
So we're with Dr. Ray, who I've had multiple 15-minute conversations with, and I think he's a pretty good guy. But I do know I'm going to say he's smart, and he is here to answer your questions today about fatherhood. Give us a call today. It is the number to call is 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. We do, in fact, have Jonathan on the line from Louisiana. He is watching on YouTube. Jonathan, go ahead with your question for Dr. Ray.
Hey, Dr. Ray. I don't mean to pump up your ego, but long-time fan. Long-time. I had a question about raising my child when I only have visitation every other weekend. I heard you say, take them to church, but it's typically at the same location, my parents' house. Just very little, a lot of structure. And, it's via divorce, of course. And I was wondering your advice more so on the divorce. You did a YouTube video about divorce where you were saying the mother was upset that she was in control the entire time in their youth, and when they grew up, they wanted to spend more time with dad. That's like my hope. My hope is that they grow up and they actively say, hey, I want more time with dad. But your response to her was, you need to get the law involved. The law is so one-sided. That was a back. I wanted to ask you about that specific video. Thank you.
I don't remember that video, Jonathan, to tell you the truth, but I see your question up here as you have visitation every other week. What can you do? I can tell you what not to do. Don't try to compete with the child's mother in terms of materialism, in terms of freedoms, in terms of goodies and perks. You'll lose. Be a solid dad. Have the limits, have the structure, have the discipline that you have. Show the child two things. One, dad may be a little more solid in his expectations than mom, but he's also very reliable. You can count on dad. If you say, well, you want your child, I'm assuming you only got one there, Jonathan, if you want your child to be more attached to you as they get older, you got to show them you're trustworthy and you're reliable. Dad says he's going to do something, he does it. Dad shows up at your game, he doesn't tell you he's going to come, and then where's dad? He shows up in the third quarter. So whatever you can do to show that child of yours, I'm your father for this limited period of time, but I'm going to give you a good look at how much you can count on me, son, daughter, whatever that is, Jonathan. That's real big. You only got so much time. Another thing I would say, don't talk down their mother. Don't do that. Even if it's very obvious some of the things that happened, resist it. If she's talking you down, do your best to simply say, here's the other side of the story, as opposed to your mother's a lying witch. So just a couple thoughts there, David.
Yeah. What do you think, Jonathan?
I think it's awesome. Thank you, Dr. Ray.
Sure. You bet. Thanks for calling in today, Jonathan. We appreciate it. Let's keep on moving down the line. Let's go to Sarah in Philadelphia. She is listening on EWTN. Go ahead, Sarah, with your question for Dr. Ray.
Hi, Dr. Ray. I think it's similar to who you just talked to, Jonathan. I missed a little bit of that conversation. But curious about, the whole situation of co-parenting, not being together as a couple, and the father as a role model, very important in a child's life, but the father, not nice to me as the mother, hasn't treated me right, but treats the child fine, treats the child okay. The child is only a couple of years old. And I guess curious about your thoughts on, well, first of all, you were just saying don't badmouth the mother. How could I handle that if the father is doing that? And also, should I be limiting the exposure? Should that child still have equal time with mother, equal time with father? Is that the healthiest option? Or, some time with father, most time with mother, if that's a little bit of the unhealthier life over there.
I don't know how you could limit it. Aren't you bound by the court's order?
At this, no, like it's like 80-20. So,
but that's
not sure if it ever changes. Is that an ideal? What's ideal, for the child?
It kind of depends situation to situation. But if that's the court order, in other words, dad gets 20% of the time, which is probably weekends and maybe one day during the week, and you don't think there's any problem in terms of the child's safety or the child's well-being or dad's neglect, then you do got to let him or her grow up knowing there's a dad there. You may have to do damage control if dad's absolutely convinced that I'm going to tell you what your mother is really like when you get old enough to understand. You may have to do damage control. But to start saying, I'm going to limit his time below what the court ordered, you got to be careful on that. Because one, I don't know if legally you can do it, and two, it may make him more hostile. You're not letting him see that child the time that he's allowed. Now, I'm not saying he's a great parent, and I'm not saying in any way he's fair to you, and I'm not saying that he will, during the time your child is there, raise this child, be with this child like you would like. The problem is, that's the reality right now, and you got to make the best of it that you can.
And if he's at some point in her life going for more time to make it more of a equal split between us, is that something I should be highly afraid of, in the sense that, it's obviously healthy to have a father in your life, but at what degree do you limit? I don't know. So,
it's going to come down to how much you believe he's a responsible, trustworthy parent. That's what it comes down to.
Can a father be very harsh on the mother, an adult, and still treat their children okay? So I've had people tell me if somebody's not right to the mother, it's only a matter of time before they're not right to their children. But is that always the case?
It's not always the case. Don't forget, your marriage, however long it lasted, probably built up a whole lot of ill will. And so he's not looking at the child at all with the same ill will that he's looking at you.
No.
The poison could come in where he decides to punish you by trying to drive a wedge between you and the child. That's probably one of the dangerous things that can happen, and you got to keep your eyes open for that. And your little one's how old? A year, 2 years, something like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so at this point, I really wouldn't worry a whole lot about somehow, some way he's penetrating this child's psyche, and then at age 6, it's all going to gurgle forward, and the child's going to say, I hate you, Mommy, because she heard all of these things about Mom. That's not likely to happen. You do got a little bit of a window here of natural protection in the child's comprehension.
Right, and then what if it gets to a point where he is doing that, and she's comprehending, and she's maybe looking at me a little differently or believing things he's saying? Do I just continue being who I am, a good person, and doing the best I can?
You have to, unless you go back to court and you say, I want a change in the visitation, and the court will say, why? And his attorney will say, why? And you'll say, well, he's not nice to me, and they'll say, that's no reason.
Right.
I'm no lawyer, but that's typically what happens. So if you're going to go back to court, you better have some solid reasons to say, this is why this visitation should be changed. Now, hopefully it would do you well to try to get along with him, to maybe even meet with him if you can and say, I will make you a commitment. I will not talk you down in any way. Will you commit to do that for me?
Right.
I don't know if he's that reasonable. One of the most common things here, Sarah, and I tell this to folks who are caught up in this vortex of divorce, which is you cannot control what the other spouse is going to do when they're with the child.
Very true.
See?
Hard lesson.
Yes, it is, my dear.
Do you have a book you would recommend that you wrote for this topic, or?
I have a book called When Faith Causes Family Friction, and I talk about two parents being very separate in raising a child religiously. You get one that does, one that doesn't.
Yes, that sounds like yes. Okay,
That's
yeah,
real
that's great.
common. That's very, very common. For your own self-confidence, I have a book called Discipline That Lasts a Lifetime, which is 100 of the most common discipline questions I get asked, and it will build up your confidence as a parent.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Doctor. I appreciate it.
Sure, Sarah. Bye.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate you calling in today. Dr. Ray, we touched on it a little bit earlier, and the intersection of faith and the family as it comes to the father and taking kids to church and the percentage that end up staying close to their faith when they're adults. With your with 10 kids, and
I didn't go home. I UPS'd her things. I said, honey, how's it going? Need me to send you anything?
Yeah, but how did you work faith into as you raised your kids in such a large family and with such diverse personalities, of course, as well?
Some of them absorbed it very well.
Mm-hmm.
Others didn't. My wife and I will never tie our peace, our contentment, to the decisions our adult children make. We were asked by God to raise them as best we could. I think we did, within humanness, right? Because you talked to me for 15 minutes and you said I was a good guy. So there it is.
Yep.
So given that, that's one thing. You recognize as a parent, some kids are just going to take in what you teach easily. And then you're going to think you're God's gift to parenthood. And then other kids are going to look at you as if to say, is that it? I don't buy that. And when I'm old enough, I'm going to head off in my own direction. Because they're all wired differently, David. They are. Parents tend to forget that. This is not a formula here, that you can apply all the right psychological, spiritual principles, and you get a little St. John Bosco and a Mother Teresa. You could get a Cujo. You know, this is the way kids are wired. I will say this about how easy it would have been for me, and in some respects, I'm a failure at that, letting my wife take the lead. She's naturally more expressive in her religion. She's naturally more pious. So it was very easy for me, if I would have yielded to the temptation, to let her take the lead. She's the one who's, reading them this particular Bible story where I'm sitting there, but she's reading the story. So I'd got to, as I said before, if I had it to do over again, I'd push myself a little bit harder. Maybe on the way home from Mass saying, so you heard what Father said. What do you guys think about that? A little bit more of that. Rather than saying, let's go get a chocolate-covered donut. Those are good.
Indeed. Again, the number to call is 888-318-7884. We are talking fatherhood, faith, the family, the role of the man in the family, and Dr. Ray has shared some of his own personal experiences raising a family of 10 children himself. We're going to go to Mary here shortly. In fact, we'll go to Mary. Mary, we'll talk to you after the break, but I did want to just really quickly mention what's going on the Catholic Answers Catholic.com shop right now. So March Madness, some will say has never been better, unless, like me, you're an alumnus of the University of Virginia, who March Madness is already over for us. If you've been following the tournament, you realize that. But on the Catholic.com shop.catholic.com, March Madness really has never been better. We're kicking things off with our March Madness $2 book sale. In fact, 106 different 20 answers titles. Well, in fact, there's 53 regular printed versions, 53 ebooks. Every one of them is just $2 a piece. That's a savings of 60%. 20 answers titles, every one of them at shop.catholic.com, just $2 each, 60% off. Use the code $2. You got to spell it out, TWODOLLAR, $2 at checkout. Don't miss out on the deal of the season. That's our March Madness $2 book sale all weekend long at shop.catholic.com. One more thing before we go to break, I want to mention this has just been publicly released, and we'll be promoting it here a little more as we go along. If you are in the San Diego area, or if you happen to be on Friday, July the 7th, make plans to come out and see the San Diego Padres host the New York Mets. Why? That is Catholic Night at Petco Park, and this year, $2 from every ticket sold at padres.com/Catholic. $2 from every ticket will go to support Catholic Answers and the ministry that we have here, our apologetics and evangelization efforts. So again, Friday, July the 7th, Petco Park, The Padres are hosting the New York Mets. $2 from every ticket sold using the promo code CatholicX, or just visit padres.com/Catholic for tickets. Got a little time left before our break, Dr. Ray. Are you currently working on any particular projects, any books that are on the agenda? Or
Yes, got a new book coming out. And I noticed, David, you looked a little surprised when I said I had 17 books. And I tell you the secret to writing a lot of books. You can't worry about them being very good. Slows you down.
Sounds like false humility to me, Dr. Ray. you have a lot of good books, and I would bet most of those 17, if not all, are outstanding.
Well, I wrote a couple scratch and sniff, so
okay.
that helps.
Those are good too, depending on what you're
not in the
what
potty training. Not in the potty training section.
Very good. 888-318-7884 is the number to call. We'll be right back.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity. In the early church was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
As Catholic apologetics have gotten stronger, Protestant responses have gotten stronger as well. And now they have their own answers to rebut the standard Catholic proofs. Don't fret, we've got you covered. In his new book, Meeting the Protestant Response, apologist Carlo Broussard gives well-reasoned biblical answers to Protestant comebacks. Order your copy of Meeting the Protestant Response today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
What if the voice of your deepest doubts about Catholicism rose up in the form of a human being and challenged you to defend your most foundational beliefs? That's the task apologist Trent Horn took upon himself in his new book, Devil's Advocate, a dialogue with his own best objections against the faith that he professes and defends. You can stand up against your doubts, and Trent will show you how. Pick up your copy of Devil's Advocate today at shop.catholic.com or at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson, fundraising director here at Catholic Answers, sitting in for CALive today. Cy is just a little under the weather, and we were just talking to Dr. Ray about the weather here in San Diego. It's rainy. It's a little chilly. Of the many times that it's great to come to San Diego, Dr. Ray, you probably picked one of the worst.
All I know, I want to go back to Ohio where it's nicer.
Isn't
than
that
this.
Yeah? Isn't that crazy? Most of the time, this is a beautiful place to visit, and in fact, if you have never been to the Catholic Answers Conference, you should make plans to come out to San Diego the last weekend of September. We are working on the speakers lineup as we speak, but it's going to be a great lineup. It always is, and our topic is atheism. And in fact, the title is I Believe in God. So if you want to come out to San Diego when it's nice and you want to spend a few days with Catholic Answers and a few of your closest Catholic friends, come to the conference here in La Jolla the last weekend in September.
David, you know the more dangerous atheism? The old atheism kind of made sense. There is no God, therefore I can do what I want. The new atheism is much more pervasive. It's in our pews. It's spread throughout, I believe, even the Christian world.
Yeah.
The new atheism is there is a God, but he thinks just like me. That's a much harder atheism to get through.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. And it's true, and it's infiltrated the family in many ways, and of course, fathers are a big part of staving that off, fighting against that sort of a current, for sure. And we are, in fact, talking about fatherhood today and the role of the father in the family. The number to call is 888-318-7884. 888-318-7884. Let's go to Mary. Mary's calling from Central Coast, California, here our home state. Watching on YouTube. Go ahead, Mary, your question for Dr. Ray.
Dr. Ray, I want to thank you very much for what you've brought to our family as far as teaching us how to raise our children. And I'd like to have your opinion on what you think of my husband's discipline method. Number one, the word discipline, he would always tell our children that it came from the word disciple, which meant to teach. And he would ask, especially as our children got too big for over my size, he would tell them to go stand at the wall, and he would call it a Jesus torture. It was basically facing the wall with their nose on the wall, on their tiptoes, and their hands up in an upright position, palms up. He would ask them to stand there and reflect how Jesus felt dying on the cross for their sins and how he would feel if he had heard you speak to his mother that way. We had some sassy children. Anyway, so I was wondering what you thought of that. And again, thank you for being in our living room for so many years. We really, really enjoy you.
I just want to say one thing, Mary. That one coffee table, that leg's a little wobbly. If you just you can put one of my books underneath there. It'll kind of even it out. All right, just a thought. Mary, parents tell me all kinds of things that they do for discipline. There's really no limit. Typically, I will take the better ones and put them in a book and make a lot of money. Thank you. I'm a little nervous about that one, Mary. I'll tell you why. I know what our Lord did for us needs to be understood and pondered. But the idea that, all right, you are going to experience vicariously just how wretched and bad that was, what you did. Now, I can understand the pondering part. I'd be very reluctant about doing something like that. I've seen other parents do other things. For example, during Lent, they had a picture of our Lord, and when the child did something wrong, which would be called a sin, they took a toothpick and they stuck it into the head of our Lord as a point of one of the thorns. I didn't like that one at all. But again, this is me. I am not the arbiter of what you are allowed to do. I can't say, well, you're absolutely inappropriate. All I can say is, well, think about it and see if it conveys a message of a guilt that you might not want to convey. On one hand, we understand what the Lord did, but on the other hand, it's kind of like, all right, so you rolled your eyes at your mother, huh? Go stand with your nose up against the wall, your hands out, and realize what you just did to our Lord. I don't know, Mayor. It's probably not what you wanted to hear, but that's my first response. I hope I still am allowed in your living room.
What do you think, Mary?
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Dr. Ray. Thanks.
Thanks, Mary.
You bet. All right.
Well, that's it. I just lost another fan. That was it. Another listener gone.
well, let's see if you can do better with Brian then. Brian in Oklahoma.
Redeem myself here, huh?
Brian in Oklahoma, listening on St. Michael's Radio. Your question for Dr. Ray. Brian, welcome.
Hi, guys. Dr. Ray, pleasure to talk with you. I'm a 44-year-old widower. My wife passed away in 2018 from breast cancer, and we have a 5-year-old son at the time. He's 9 years old now. And I'm just wondering how to find some balance. Families are traditionally a mother and a father and the children. And, men bring their gifts to the table as well, and women bring their special, unique gifts to the table. I'm trying to find that balance, and I'm really just bringing the male gifts. And so it's kind of hard, and I'm wondering if you have any advice on finding some balance and just trying to raise a good young man
Let me start out with the good news here, Brian. Everybody knows that divorce is bad for kids because of all kinds of complications. And the follow-up studies of kids show more struggles in life than children who are raised with two committed parents. Okay. Does the same follow with a widowed or widowered parent? No, it does not. So the first thing I want to say to you is don't think that somehow automatically your son is going to be more of a struggling young adult because he has his father raising him, at least for the near future. It's not true, first thing. Second thing, be very, very careful about the he's a special child mindset, meaning he doesn't have his mother. He's only got me. So he's already been shortchanged emotionally. I have to make sure he doesn't have too much more frustration. I will alter the way I parent. I will give leeway when I shouldn't give leeway. I will allow things that I otherwise wouldn't allow if we were a two-parent family. Don't do that. I've seen that happen so much in single-parent situations, and it just makes it way worse. So that's the second thing. The third thing, don't shortchange yourself. Yeah, okay, so you bring natural masculine abilities to the table, but that doesn't mean you can't develop abilities like listening better. You know, your wife was naturally a better listener. Okay, well, that doesn't mean you can't learn to be a better listener. Your wife was naturally more nurturing or affectionate, and you're saying, yeah, it doesn't come so easy to me. Well, you can be better at it. I had a mom call me once, same boat of yours, Brian, and she said same thing, only she said it the opposite way. And I said, well, that doesn't mean you still can't be a good disciplinarian. My husband was the disciplinarian. Well, it doesn't come easy or natural to you, but you can get better at it. And that's what I would say. Don't second guess this idea that I'm kind of limited by what I bring to the table as a man. Not necessarily. It may not be natural to you to do some of the things that your wife did, but you can get better at them. And I think that's the best gift you can give your son. So don't be second guessing all this. Tell your son, hey, I'm here to be the best parent I can be as a man, and I'm going to do some of the things that your mom did. That's what I would do.
Well, I appreciate that so much, Dr. A. Sometimes I do. I tend to second guess myself, and he's going to not get this and not get that and end up like this. And
you cannot enjoy parenting. Yeah. You can't be a good parent if you do that. You parent in fear, and your whole parenting is going to shift.
Right.
You're not going to do the good things
work in progress.
You need to do. Okay.
Well, God bless you, Dr. Ray, and God bless you guys. And prayers to Cy. Hope he feels better soon.
We will pass it along for sure. Thank you, Brian. We appreciate your call today. And Dr. Ray, that topic, as you were talking about developing skills that you may not feel you naturally have in such a situation, is affection one of those?
That's what I tell fathers. You know, a lot of guys are not as affectionate. Mothers are more nurturing as a group than guys are. But that doesn't mean you can't be. You don't say nonsense things like, well, that's not me. Well, that's not who I am. Well, it's hard for me. I don't feel like doing that. It doesn't come natural. None of that. That's all bogus. For heaven's sakes, hug that boy. Tell that boy you love him. Don't let that 15-year-old daughter say, don't touch me out in public. No way. I'll tell you what, here's where I was, David. If any of my kids did something like that out in public and tried to put a limit on me like that, I did more.
Of course you did.
My daughter was 13 years old, and I was doing the TV show, and she was in the audience. I said, Lizzie, honey, can you come up here, please? And she came up, and 13-year-old girls are kind of a little bit shy about this whole thing. I said, this is my daughter, Elizabeth. And I said, Lizzie, can I ask something of you, honey? She goes, I guess. And I grabbed her, and I gave her this biggest hug and smooch right on the cheek. And I looked at the camera, and I said, there it is, right on TV. I said, Liz, if I did this to you on national TV, it ain't going to be bad in front of 4 of your friends.
Indeed. God bless you. 888-318-7884 is the number to call. We are talking about fatherhood here in the last about 15 or 20 minutes or so here with Dr. Ray Guarendi. We're going to take our last break of the hour, and we'll be right back after this with more Dr. Ray.
Hello, this is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Keep your dial tuned to Catholic Answers Live.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
I don't like looking back. I prefer to look forward and keep moving forward. There's plenty to cover. I do a lot of research and try to dig out the bits and pieces of a life or of an agenda that people don't want to talk about.
The World Over with Raymond Arroyo. Tonight, 8 Eastern on EWTN Radio and Television.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Once again, David Matheson sitting in for Cy Kellett. Today, the number to call is 888-318-7884. We are wrapping up a great first hour today of Catholic Answers Live with Dr. Ray Guarendi. Our topic has been and will be as we come to the end of this first hour, fatherhood. Fatherhood is our conversation. Second hour, we have Jimmy Akin coming up. Jimmy will be doing his usual Thursday afternoon open forum. So when Jimmy's on, any call about the Catholic faith will be open season, so to speak. Let's go to Jim in Portland, Oregon. Jim, your question for Dr. Ray.
Yeah. Oh, am I on?
Yes, you are, Jim. Go right ahead.
Okay. I didn't hear a click or anything.
Yeah, it's okay.
How important is it for a father to have a sense of humor? And do you think God has got a sense of humor? To me, that second question is a very profound one. It might sound flippant, but it's very profound.
Well, if you mean that God has the ability to look at things in ways that would be humorous and funny, well, of course, that would mean he'd be the ultimate comedian. Because good comedy is taking reality and seeing a different slant on it. And who would be better to do that than God? That's the first thing. Part about dads having a sense of humor. It certainly can help, but not everybody's blessed with a sense of humor. Not everybody has the natural ability to take situations and make them relaxed and humorous and make people laugh so that you can swallow the medicine. I would say this, though. Everybody has the ability to laugh. Everybody has the ability to not overreact. They can try. I mean, they can work on it. Dads have the ability to listen and find the upside, the humorous side in what they're hearing. May not be able to make jokes, may not be able to get off a good line here and there. But we dads have a bad reputation. You know, the dad jokes? Dad jokes, they always talk about that. But you know what's worse, David? Kid jokes. Kid jokes are the worst. I mean, as a dad, you got to sit and listen to a kid joke and don't interrupt them because they start over. And they're the dumbest things in the world, but you got to look like they're the greatest things in the world. And the kid can't get it out because he's laughing all the way through the joke. Dad, okay, okay, Dad, this is really funny, okay? Okay, so Dad, what do you call, and then if I make a mistake and go, what do you call, no, okay, Dad, okay. So just listen, Dad, just listen. It's like an hour and a half for one bad kid joke.
One punchline.
That's it. Yeah, humor is nice, but not everybody's blessed with a natural sense of humor, but you can always be blessed with kind of an uplifting ability to laugh.
Makes sense, Jim.
It's important to know when to tone down the seriousness. Legalism can be a really awful thing, and it's know when to be human again.
Mother told me once, parenting is too important to be taken seriously. I think there's a lot of truth in that. You got to. My wife and I, with the stuff that our kids pulled growing up, we learned in a lot of ways that this too shall pass, and we said this is just good stuff for them to tell their therapist, I guess, you know.
Okay, appreciate that. I want to wish you tomorrow St. Patrick's Day, so I hope it's a good one.
Well, you know, I was in the evangelical world, and where I was, they didn't like saying St. Patrick, and I said it was Mr. Patrick. Tomorrow's Mr. Patrick's Day.
You know what his real name was Manasakat. I think Patrick is kind of an epithet or a title or something, the patrician saint. I think his real name was Manasakat, but we got it as Patrick.
Yeah.
And that's something you don't hear on Jeopardy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, thank you, Jim. We appreciate you calling in today. You bet.
Thanks, Jim.
Yep. Take care. Let's stay in Portland. Let's go to Caleb, listening on 88.3 FM. Caleb, your question for Dr. Ray.
Oh, hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Well, yeah, thanks for taking my call. So I was trying to think of how to phrase it. Well, really, I grew up without a father, and it was only a couple years ago that I really started to get my life together, and I started building a career and thinking about trying to become a father myself. I just didn't know if there was any maybe broad advice for building those traits of fatherhood that would be important for somebody who grew up without a dad.
I'll give you the broadest advice, Caleb. You want to be a good father? Be a good human being. That's the best advice I can give you. Grow in virtue, grow in love of God, grow in love of that kid, and you'll automatically be a better father. If you say to yourself, I missed out, am I forever shortchanged? Of course not. Of course you're not. You can always second guess yourself because you think, well, maybe I'm missing it. You know, I don't know what I don't know because I don't know what I didn't see because I didn't have a father. You do that to yourself, Caleb, and I think you're going to actually stunt your growth as a father. Yes, you didn't see some of the stuff that you could have seen. But that doesn't mean you can't still be a better father than a whole bunch of people who had fathers.
What do you think?
That's really reassuring because so I have nieces and nephews, and I wound up telling my cousin one day, like, you know, I logically come to this conclusion that children are like the best gift that life can offer, but I really only experienced it through hanging out with your kids, with playing with your kids, you know, and I thank you for that.
You can be a great uncle.
It's just such a joy.
You can be a great uncle, Caleb. And you can, you know, if you're saying, okay, I need somebody talking to me about fatherhood, get a good mentor. Get some guy that, you know, that like David here, who's raised a bunch of kids here, and he knows what he's doing, and run stuff by him. You can always do that.
Yeah.
I saw a study once. It was a great study. They said they wanted to know why these kids who didn't have fathers grew up to be very admirable. And one of the things they pointed to was that there was a male in their life with some presence, a coach, an uncle, a big brother, some male in their life.
How about that? Caleb, I'll tell you what, stay on the line, and our call screener, Thomas, he'll take your information. We have a great book called To Know St. Joseph. And, of course, St. Joseph, the earthly father of our Lord, what a great example to learn from as well. And if you'd like to get that book, hang on the line. Thomas will take your info. We'll be happy to send that out to you.
For a second there, I thought you were going to refer him to one of mine. Just for a second there.
We can't
You're
give
raising
away
funds,
your
aren't
books.
you? You're raising funds.
I can give away our books, Dr. Ray. So hang on, Caleb. We'll send you to know St. Joseph and give your information to Thomas, okay? All right. Let's go to Jonathan in Boston on line 4. He is listening on the EWTN app. Jonathan, go ahead. Your question for Dr. Ray.
Blessings on all. And for listeners, please support Catholic Answers and their books and buy Dr. Ray's books.
There you go. Thank you, Jonathan.
Just unbelievable how much coincidence here, but I had a comment that segue on, Doctor, please, is I found that the most difficult part of parenting as a father is trying to keep a straight face when they do something naughty. It's like, you know.
You don't want to.
Isn't that funny?
You don't want to reward it, but it's hard sometimes. Yeah, because especially if it's kid junk. A lot of stuff the kids do is just simply kid stuff. It's the stuff of growing up. It's mischief. It's not necessarily malice. It isn't in-your-face defiance. It's just kid immaturity, and it's funny. Well, in my new book, Taught by 10, notice how I slipped that in there, David? Because you had been derelict in even saying anything about it.
I mentioned a bunch of your books at the beginning.
Just generic. Anyway, I talk about that in the book. I talk about how when some of the kids pulled the stunts that they did, my wife and I had to go in another room to snicker. We did. That didn't mean we didn't discipline them if they needed it, but it was, you just don't overreact to it. Your question, Jonathan, is what is the most difficult part of parenting? For most parents, loving and not so loving, by far the most difficult part is discipline. Following through, staying calm, being consistent, perseverance, setting up the expectations. That is by far the most difficult part for parents. They go to confession. Bless me, Father. You know, before I had children, I was pretty nice. Now, I'm not pretty or nice. The priest will tell you that. They'll come in and they'll talk about their frustration because the difficult part of discipline is establishing the things you know your kids don't like when they're kids. Can't we all just get along? Come on, you guys.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And as you say, Doctor, hold them tightly by the hand.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Blessings on you all. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
You bet.
Hey, did you see this question for Jimmy here, right here? Did you see that question for Jimmy?
I do see that question for Jimmy from Skylar.
Boy, I tell you, I'd like to address that, but it's, Jimmy's going to do it a lot better, but I'm tired of being his lead-in act, I'm getting the Frisbees and the beach balls gone for Jimmy.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you what, is we got a couple minutes left here in the show. Tell me a little bit about, for those who aren't as familiar with your show, the Doctor Is In show, talk to me a little bit about that. And then you've also got a TV show on EWTN television that I believe airs during the weekends.
Yes.
Okay. Talk about your two shows a little bit, if someone might find them of
I didn't
interest.
want to go to Catholic radio.
Yeah.
When I was asked, I just peremptorily said, no, thank you. My wife was the one who said, give it a chance, Ray.
Yeah.
So I gave it a chance, and I couldn't believe its power. People coming back to the faith. And I remember thinking, well, I can't go to God and say, I'm a pretty busy guy. Really don't have time to do something that I see does a lot of good for your kingdom.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing. The television show was something I always wanted to do. I did a ton of secular television. I did Oprah and Jenny Jones and CBS This Morning, and those were all dead-end stuff. And I remember thinking, I'd love to have my own show. And I approached EWTN. I said, I got an idea for a segmented show. We're going to have 8 or 10 segments in the show, try to be entertaining, get people who would not otherwise watch Catholic media to say, I like what that guy says, and then hang around and get caught into Catholic media. So that's it's in its 12th season.
What tends to be, we were talking about fatherhood today, which is a big topic for you, I'm sure. What are the biggest topics that you tend to address? Generically, I guess the family obviously is a big part of what you do.
Huge one right now coming to me is the sadness, the distress of older parents whose children have left the faith or who have estranged themselves from the family or who have rejected the faith or who want little contact. There's a lot of that out there. There's tons of it. And in some respects, I don't know if this is true. It's my own experience. Faithfully religious parents are getting more of that because the culture is shaping their children and their adult children who look back at the parents and say, yeah, well, I'll tell you what, that's not for me. And there's a lot of that, a ton. It could be, next to discipline, it could be my number one reason people come in.
And then if you had, let's say you had 2 books that you were going to recommend, one for this type of parent, one for this type, or in this sort of situation. Give me 2 books and the quick 5-second description.
I got a grandparent book, Most Common Questions I Get from Grandparents, Discipline That Lasts a Lifetime, 100 Most Common Discipline Questions I Get Asked, and Raising Upright Kids in an Upside Down World, How the Culture Can Shape Your Kid Under Your Nose.
Very good. We got a bonus one there. Thank you, Dr. Ray. Great to have you here in town.
Thanks, David.
Thanks for being in studio, and thanks for all your good work on EWTN and with us here on Catholic Answers Live. We got Jimmy Akin coming up in hour 2. Open forum. The number to call is 888-318-7884. Already got a couple calls up there on the board. Call now. Get in early. Your question for Jimmy Akin. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, your number one source on Catholic radio for apologetics and evangelization. I am David Matheson, and I'm your host today in lieu of CALive. Cy's a little under the weather today. I'm happy to sit in for him, but certainly keep Cy in your prayers. We hope to have him back tomorrow. We just finished up a great first hour with Dr. Ray Guarendi, and we are about to start an hour of open forum, our typical Thursday afternoon with Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. The number to call is 888-318-7884. Again, 888-318-7884. It is an open forum. Any question about the Catholic faith is fair game. Jimmy, welcome to the show today. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, no problem. And generally on my shows, any questions not about the Catholic faith are fair game too. So people can call in and ask with just about anything except sports ball.
Even better. So let me step back. Any question about the Catholic faith is fair game, but Jimmy's ready to take any question about anything. And of course, one of the areas where he covers some of the oddities, if you will, some of the unexplained phenomenon, if you will, all kinds of different things, is your podcast, Jimmy, Mysterious World. Tell us a little bit about what's going on over there, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's going on over here at Catholic Answers.
Well, we're doing a two-part look at conspiracies connected to the deputy Führer of Nazi Germany. So he was the second-in-command guy, at least for a time. His name was Rudolf Hess, and he flew in 1841 to Scotland on a peace mission. He came over bearing a peace plan to settle things between Britain and Germany, and there are all kinds of questions about that peace plan. What was it? Because the British government, not everyone's convinced they've announced everything that he said. Also, trapped into this by British people who tricked him into coming, and were there supernatural forces? In the prison, and when he died, did he commit suicide like the authorities said, or was he deliberately killed? And if so, who did it? So we did part one last week. People can catch up on that if they want. And then this week we're going to be looking at, was it an imposter, and was he murdered?
And Jimmy, for those who are not subscribers or have not listened to your show before, how can they best find Mysterious World?
They can go to mysterious.fm, or they can go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jimmy Akin, or they can just look it up in a podcast directory. It's in all the standard podcast apps.
Very good. The number to call again is 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. Jim, of course, with your work here at Catholic Answers, you are, among other things, the Dean of the School of Apologetics. What's going on over there with the school? And, of course, it continues to grow. I mean, we've got students in the school from all over the world at this point. I think it's something like 45 or 50 different countries now, thousands of participants. What's going on with School of Apologetics? What are your anything new?
Well, there are always courses in preparation. I understand that our studios department is editing several courses that have already been recorded, including one I have coming out that's a major course called Evidence for Christ. And we just had another filming session in which Trent Horn and I both recorded courses. Trent did one on answering Protestant objections, and I did one on understanding the magisterium and how to interpret magisterial documents.
Very good. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we, hey, Sarah, why don't we go ahead and take our first break for the hour? And we got a couple things we need to iron out here logistically. When we come back, again, it is an open forum with Jimmy Akin. 888-318-7884 is the number to call. Let's take our first break. We'll be right back after this.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Do you have a question but prefer to ask it privately? Catholic Questions can help. Go to CatholicQuestions.com to ask your question online, email us, drop us a letter, or give us a call. Longtime Catholic Answers Live apologist and author Jim Blackburn or another Catholic Questions apologist will be happy to assist you. Catholic Questions proudly supports Catholic Answers Live, so visit us at CatholicQuestions.com today. That's CatholicQuestions.com.
The destination for great Catholic audio programming is EWTN Podcast Central, featuring the best of EWTN radio, as well as faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates across the nation, all in one place, all free. If it's central to the faith, you can find it on EWTN Podcast Central. It's like podcast heaven. Visit EWTN.com/radio/podcasts today.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson, fundraising director here at Catholic Answers, sitting in for CALive this afternoon, and very happy to have you with us, listeners. And my guest this hour is Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, for a Thursday afternoon open forum. Any question is fair game. Catholic faith, unexplained occurrences, whatever it might be. Jimmy
Science.
is science. That's right. Faith and reason, you name it. We can talk about all of these sorts of things. We've got several calls up here on the line. You ready to get started, Jimmy?
Sure.
All right. Let's go to Patrick in Lakeside Park, Kentucky. Patrick is listening on 740 AM. Go right ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys.
You bet.
I am been asked by my niece to marry and officiate their wedding. My niece and her fiance. It's not. They're not Catholic. They're not practicing Catholic. I'm trying to be. And I just feel I need some guidance, man. So I was going to see what the church would say about a lay person coming ordained by whatever.com they got. And, what would that mean to me as my faith is building?
Well, I wouldn't recommend that that you get ordained from some mail order ordination company because ordination is a religious act, and as a practicing Catholic, you shouldn't be ordained outside of the Catholic Church. But that wouldn't stop you from being able to perform a marriage. There are all kinds of people who are authorized under state law to perform marriages. If people go down to the courthouse, for example, and they get married, they could get married by a judge or a justice of the peace or just a worker at the courthouse. So you don't have to be an ordained minister in order to perform a wedding. And if this was something you wanted to do, I would suggest contacting, you'd have to find out the law in your state and then contact the state government. But typically, the people who are not ordained, who perform marriages, at least in some locations, they're called deputy commissioners of marriage. And that's what they're called here in California. And I know that because my sister asked me to perform the marriage ceremony for her and her fiance, now her husband. And I checked into it, and there was nothing in canon law saying Catholics can't do this. I checked with a canon lawyer. There was nothing about their situation that was problematic. They neither one of them were Catholics. It was the first marriage for both of them. And so their marriage would be presumed valid by the church. And so I got commissioned as a deputy commissioner of marriages to do this just one single wedding. And it was a very easy process. It just involved filling out a form. And so I performed the service for them. So it's definitely something that can be done. But you'll notice one of the things that I brought up in that story is the fact that there was not any problem on the part of the two individuals. Neither my sister nor her fiance were Catholics, and so they weren't subject to Catholic canon law. One of the requirements of Catholic canon law is that if you have been baptized or received into the church, whether you're practicing or not, if you have ever been baptized or received into the Catholic Church, then you need to either have a Catholic wedding, or you need to get what's known as a dispensation from form in order to have a non-Catholic wedding. So the question I need to ask you is either your niece or your fiance someone who has ever been Catholic?
I believe the fiance has, yes.
Okay. Well, even if he's not practicing now, what he would need to do in order for you to perform this marriage is he would need to get a dispensation from form, which is something that comes from the bishop, and they can apply for one depending on the circumstances. It might be easy to get, it might not be, but unless he has assuming he was ever Catholic, he either needs to have a Catholic wedding, and he'd talk to his pastor for that. The pastor could designate another priest or deacon to do it, but he would need to go to his pastor, or he would need to get a dispensation from form. And if he gets one that would allow
I'll tell you
for
what,
this
I will put
wedding,
your question up there.
then you could potentially perform the marriage as a deputy commissioner of marriages. On the other hand, if it turns out that neither one of them has ever been Catholic, then you just need to become a deputy commissioner of marriages and you could proceed.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time, and I'll be listening next time for the next piece of advice.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. We appreciate you calling in today. Let's keep rolling. Let's go to Skylar in Wisconsin, who's been waiting patiently since the end of the last hour for Jimmy to come on board. She is listening on the Catholic Answers app. Go ahead, Skylar, with your question.
Yeah, good evening, gentlemen. Me again, the Lutheran pre-seminary student. Very quickly, I wanted to thank Jimmy for being so respectful and effective at explaining things. You debated Dr. Jordan B. Cooper, who actually used to be my pastor when I lived in New York, on the doctrine of justification over on Matt Fradd's channel, and he really showed me how horribly I misunderstood the Catholic view on justification. That's led to me re-examining Catholicism in a whole new light. So my question is this, what is faith working through charity? I don't understand what that means. So if you could just please explain it to me like a child.
Okay. Well, faith working through love or faith working through charity is a concept that St. Paul mentions in Galatians chapter 3. And the basic idea is that as part of one's Christian faith, you know, God's highest priority is love. That's the two great commandments, love God and love your neighbor. And so we put our Christian faith into practice by doing acts of love, either acts of love directed towards God or acts of love directed towards our neighbors. And so, so that's what it means in practice. But as long, in terms of what's required for salvation, it is likely to manifest in outward acts of love for God and neighbor, but it doesn't have to. As long as you have the theological virtue of faith in your soul and the virtue of charity, which is supernatural love of God, as long as you have those two virtues in your soul, you are in a state of grace. And so you're in a state of salvation. And you could be unconscious. You know, people, when they go to sleep or if they go into a coma or something like that, they still have faith and charity in their souls, even though it's not manifesting. And so sort of the foundational level of what you need for salvation is faith that that is coupled, the virtue of faith, which is coupled with the virtue of charity. And normally in the Christian life, that manifests in outward works, you know, such as, you know, works of love for God, like, you know, worshiping him, or acts of love for our neighbors, like helping them out. But it's not required that you do any certain number of those works in order to be saved. What is essential is that you have those two virtues in your soul. And so if you have the two virtues, you have what's needed for salvation.
So do those virtues ever, like, do they disappear temporarily if you commit a mortal sin, or do they still exist, or how does that play out?
the virtue of charity does vanish when you commit a mortal sin, because when you commit a mortal sin, you're saying, I prefer this other thing to God, whatever it may be, whether it's lust or money or power, I prefer that to God. And so you no longer love God above all things. I mean, maybe you have a little fondness for him, but he's not your highest priority anymore. And so the virtue of charity does disappear with mortal sin. The virtue of faith does not, because people can still have all the same beliefs when they are in a state of mortal sin. They can still believe God. They can still believe all the truths of the Christian faith. What happens, what the virtue of faith is where we believe in God and believe everything that he reveals to us, that we know he's revealed. So you can reject the virtue of faith. You can say, oh, I know God says that this is true, but I just don't buy it. Or you could even go all the way and say, yeah, I don't believe in God anymore. And that would be rejecting the virtue of faith. But you can still maintain faith even though you don't have charity in your soul. That's something that James mentions in chapter 2 of his letter, where he says, look, even the demons believe. Even the demons have faith in this sense. They believe the teachings of the Christian faith, but that's not going to save them from God's wrath, because it's just an intellectual faith. It's not a faith that's motivated by charity or coupled with charity in their case.
Skylar, thank you for your call today. Two things. First, hang on the line, and Thomas, our call screener, will take your information, and we'll send you a copy of Jimmy's book, Words of Eternal Life. That might be a good short read, fairly short read to kind of accompany you. What do you think, Jimmy?
Yeah. Also, I'd send him a copy of 20 Answers, Faith and Works, which is another
good
one
one.
I wrote.
Yep. So we'll send you both of those. And, of course, Skylar, also, you can always go to Catholic.com if you got any questions, middle of the night, and you want to get an answer. We got a lot of resources on Catholic.com that can help you along in your journey as well. So hang tight. Thomas will take your information, and call us again sometime.
Great. Thanks, guys.
You bet. All right. Let's go to line 3. Rich in Troy, New York. He is listening or watching on Catholic.com. Go right ahead, Rich. Your question for Jimmy.
Thank you. My question is, how do we explain to the Jews how the new covenant in Jesus Christ fulfills the old covenant and prophecy concerning the Messiah?
Well, it's kind of a big topic, and I can't, go into it in too much depth in just a short radio answer. One of the things I would suggest is, if you really want to dive deep into this subject, is when my course Evidence for Christ comes out, I would suggest getting that, because that's exactly what that course does. I have a big section where I go through messianic prophecy in the Old Testament and, talk about the different understandings of the Messiah, and then how Jesus fulfilled messianic prophecy, as well as other evidence that he was part of God's plan, like the fact he rose from the dead. If someone comes back from the dead and says God did that, he's the most qualified one to interpret how he came back from the dead. And if he says, I'm fulfilling these prophecies, then you have good evidence. Not only has the prophecy been fulfilled, but it was fulfilled through him, and you should take seriously what he has to say about things like the prophesied new covenant, which is mentioned, for example, by the prophet Jeremiah. And Jesus announced that. He said this when he instituted the Lord's Supper, he said, this is the new covenant in my blood. So Jesus was consciously instituting the new covenant. He also fulfilled other messianic prophecies, like the suffering servant of Isaiah 53. There's now, not everyone in the Jewish community thinks that the suffering servant is the Messiah. There's actually a debate about that in the Jewish community, but you do have some Jewish sources that acknowledge, yeah, that's a messianic prophecy. It very clearly, in hindsight, reflects what happened to Jesus in his ministry. There are various other messianic prophecies that Jesus also fulfilled, particularly from the book of Isaiah. There are also Psalms that are of a royal Davidic nature that also correspond to things that happened in Jesus's life. And so it's really a matter, if you want to talk to a Jewish person, you can tell them Jesus fulfilled the new covenant, and he had this very special place in God's plan. He's the Messiah. We can tell a Jewish person those things, but if we really want to back it up with evidence, it's a matter of learning some of these individual prophecies and learning some of the evidence for Christ as the one who fulfilled them, and he genuinely was part of God's plan as illustrated by his resurrection from the dead. And so it's a matter of doing a little bit of homework. And my course, Evidence for Christ, when it comes out, shouldn't be too long. I know they're working on it now, doing the editing. That's something that would provide you a good in-depth look at that. Even something short like Words of Eternal Life, I cover some of the information in there as well. So maybe, David, we can send him a copy of that as well, and it'll at least give him a brief look at some of the evidence.
Indeed. Rich, hang on the line. And once again, Thomas will take your information. We'll send you a copy of that book, Words of Eternal Life. And I'll also mention, we talked about it early on in the show, the School of Apologetics, our online apologetics school with a bunch of different courses and a lot more on the way, including the Evidence for Christ course that Jimmy mentioned. You can always find out what's going on with the School of Apologetics at School of Apologetics, spell it all out, schoolofapologetics.com. That'll show you what's currently available. You can get registered there, and you will see Jimmy's brand new course. When it's finished in editing, it's polished, it's all ready to go, it will show up there as well. And, of course, we'll promote it through all of the usual channels also. But in the meantime, go to schoolofapologetics.com to find out more. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate you calling in. Hang on the line, and we'll get that book out to you. I'll tell you what, let's go to Isaac on line 4 from Suffolk, Virginia, listening on EWTN. Isaac, how old are you?
10.
10 years old. God bless you. Thanks for calling in, Isaac. What's your question for Jimmy?
Are ghosts real?
Well, ghosts are real in the sense that ghosts are human spirits, and human spirits are real. The word for spirit and the word for ghost mean the same thing. That's why we can refer to the Holy Spirit and the Holy Ghost. The Holy Spirit and the Holy Ghost are the same thing. A ghost is just another word for a spirit, and obviously spirits exist, and that includes human spirits. So when a human dies, their spirit leaves their body, and it's a ghost. The kind of the second question, and the one that many people are interested in, is can ghosts ever make contact with the living? Can they ever appear to the living? And the traditional Catholic understanding is yes, they can. When a ghost appears, it's called an apparition. And there have been many apparitions down through church history. Some of them have been investigated by the church, and the church concluded in some cases that there is good reason to say, yeah, this really was an apparition of a departed soul, like maybe a saint appearing to someone and talking to them. Saints aren't the only ones, though, that are commonly thought to be able to appear to the living. According to many Catholic thinkers, souls in purgatory can also appear to people who are alive. Maybe they have some unfinished business from life that they need to take care of as part of their purgatory, or maybe they need to ask for prayers or something like that. So it's very commonly believed that not only can saints appear to humans, but also souls in purgatory can appear to humans who are still alive. And according to at least a few authors, like St. Thomas Aquinas, even a lost soul could appear to humans. And so the basic answer is yes, ghosts are real, both in the sense that human spirits are real and in the sense that they can appear to human beings. If you'd like to learn more about that, maybe your parents would let you listen to an episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. It was the very first episode we did. So if you go to mysterious.fm/1, because it's episode 1, mysterious.fm/1, you'll find that episode, and your parents can listen to it and see if they think if it would be a good thing for you to listen to.
What do you think, Isaac? Did Jimmy answer your question?
Yeah.
All right. Well, very good. Well, thanks for calling in today. We appreciate it. Call us back sometime. Every now and then we actually have a show where only kids call in. Jimmy, I think you've hosted that show before. I think Carlo Broussard has done it before. Many of our apologists have done that particular show. But it's a great show, and we would love to hear from you again, Isaac, okay?
Okay.
All right. Thanks again. The number to call is 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. We are midway through the second hour. It's a full hour of open forum. Any question is fair game for our own Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. We'll be right back after this.
As Catholic apologetics have gotten stronger, Protestant responses have gotten stronger as well. And now they have their own answers to rebut the standard Catholic proofs. Don't fret, we've got you covered. In his new book, Meeting the Protestant Response, apologist Carlo Broussard gives well-reasoned biblical answers to Protestant comebacks. Order your copy of Meeting the Protestant Response today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
In These 12, The Gospel Through the Apostles' Eyes, best-selling author Rod Bennett gives a riveting re-examination of gospel events from the ground floor perspective of Christ's own hand-picked successors. In his trademark storytelling style, Bennett movingly depicts what it was like for the apostles to witness Jesus' teaching and miracles up close. Why did he call them, and what did he intend for them to do? Order your copy of These 12 today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity. In the early church was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson sitting in for CALive. Normally, I am the fundraising director here at Catholic Answers, but every now and then I get the opportunity to sit in for Cy. It's great to spend an afternoon with you folks, our listeners, and today we're in the middle of an open forum with our own senior apologist, Jimmy Akin. The number to call again is 888-318-7884. Really quick, just want to mention, I mentioned this in the last hour, I'll mention it once again, and the note I have here says, March Madness has never been better. For those of us whose teams have lost in the first round of the tournament today, I would argue with that. However, on shop.catholic.com, it really has never been better because we're kicking things off with our March Madness $2 book sale. All 20 Answers titles. That's 53 printed booklets, 53 ebooks that match the printed versions, 106 total 20 Answers booklets, titles, just $2 each. That is 60% off the regular price. Just use code $2. Spell it out, TWODOLLAR. The code is $2 at checkout, and that will get you any of our or all of our 20 Answers booklets at shop.catholic.com. You'll get them for just $2 each. That is a savings of 60%. This is the deal of the season. It's our March Madness $2 book sale all weekend long at shop.catholic.com starting right now. Let's keep rolling here. We're going to go to Michael in Akron. Michael is listening on 1060 AM. Go right ahead, Michael, your question for Jimmy.
So I guess to try to keep it brief, I'm Greek Orthodox, but I've had an interest for a couple years now in the Catholic faith, and I know there's a lot of resources like for explaining the Catholic faith like to Protestants, but it's been hard for me to find like good books or articles or podcasts or really anything that like detail some of like the kind of hang-ups for Orthodox who, like the filioque or like the role of the Pope and that kind of thing. Like, so I didn't know if there was anything that you guys could recommend to like, as an Orthodox, help me understand Catholicism and maybe like kind of clear up things to help me make, I guess I'm kind of in a stage where, I'm not really wanting to necessarily leave the Orthodox Church, but if I really felt convinced, I feel like I would seriously start to consider becoming Catholic. So I'm kind of in that middle spot, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I can recommend several things. There, in terms of online literature, there's actually an article that I wrote a number of years ago about why I didn't become Eastern Orthodox, because, I was coming from a Protestant background, and as I was learning more about historic Christianity, it was a question I had to face. Should I be Catholic or should I be Orthodox? And so I ended up writing an article. I believe the title is just Why I'm Not Eastern Orthodox by Jimmy Akin. It's on my personal website, jimmyakin.com, but if you just Google Why I'm Not Eastern Orthodox Jimmy Akin, it should come up for you. We also have had various discussions of questions, including the filioque and other things, at Catholic.com. So if you go to Catholic.com and type in Orthodoxy or Eastern Orthodoxy, a number of different resources will appear there for you for free. When it comes to books, to print literature, there is an older book. It's I think it was published in the 1980s by, I know one of the authors was James Likoudis, Likoudis, and possibly also Ken Whitehead, but I know James Likoudis was one of the authors, and I believe the title was Ending the Byzantine Greek Schism, which is not the friendliest title in the world, but he does get into the material. There is another book, though, that is going to be coming out later this year by Catholic Answers, and it's written by an apologist named Michael Lofton. He himself is a former Orthodox who's now Catholic, and I've seen the manuscript to the book, and he goes through filioque and purgatory and the Pope and all kinds of different things. I don't recall the exact title. It's something like Responding to Orthodox Objections. And that's what it focuses on. It's primarily, dealing with, challenges to the Catholic understanding of things that have been posed by people from the Orthodox community. Michael's also going to be teaching a course for the School of Apologetics on that subject, but that's still in the planning stages, so that'll be a while. In terms of video resources, I would suggest checking out Michael Lofton's video channel on YouTube. It's called Reason and Theology. So if you go to YouTube and type in Reason and Theology, it should show up for you. But I know that Michael deals with Orthodox questions fairly frequently, so I could recommend that as well.
Yep, indeed, and of course, Michael is a former Orthodox himself, and I'll also mention to you, Michael from Akron. We just did a Catholic Answers Focus episode on YouTube about this exact topic as well. So if you go to the Catholic Answers Focus channel or the Catholic Answers channel and search within YouTube for I think just Eastern Orthodoxy, I think it should show up for you. But it was an episode on Catholic Answers Focus as well. A lot of resources that we have to help you.
All right, cool. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You bet, Michael. Thanks for calling in today. All right. Let's go to Blake on line 1 in Sweetwater, Tennessee, watching on YouTube. Go right ahead, Blake.
Hi. I was just wondering if there is an ancient Jewish pre-Christian equivalent of praying to saints, because it's something I've really struggled with since I've decided to convert to Catholicism. I grew up Protestant, so it's really new to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that. When I was becoming Catholic as well, this was one of the last things I got comfortable with. Not so much on the theoretical side of things, because I could understand that the principles of the Christian faith didn't prohibit me from saying, "Hey, Saint, Mary, will you please pray for me?" or something like that. There's nothing. It doesn't violate biblical prohibitions on necromancy, because it's not necromancy. So I realized intellectually that this was not a problem, but it took a while for me to get comfortable emotionally with being able to talk to the saints, because it was something that was so commonly stressed in my Protestant background, that one should not do that, that I had an emotional um, concern that took a while to deal with. In terms of there being an ancient pre-Christian Jewish equivalent, there isn't in terms of human saints. Um, the it in prior, and there's a fairly good reason for that, which is prior to the time of Christ, it was generally understood that the souls of the departed were not in heaven. This is one of the things that Jesus did when he died and rose again and then ascended into heaven, was he opened heaven for all of the souls of the righteous dead that had died before his time. And so it wasn't commonly understood that they were in heaven and with God and praying to God. Instead, it was understood that they were in Sheol, which is sometimes translated the grave, but it's also kind of an underworld realm, and that's where they were prior to the time of Christ. And so we see that, for example, in First Samuel, where King Saul, at one point, he's trying to get information from God, but God is not answering him. God's not picking up the phone. And so in desperation, Saul decides to go and consult the necromancer. He finds a medium known as the Witch of Endor, which is the biblical basis for the character Endora from the Bewitched show from the 1960s. That's who she is. Endora is the Witch of Endor. But he goes to this medium from Endor and says, "I want you to call up the deceased prophet Samuel for me, because God is not answering me in any of the usual ways, and so I want to talk to Samuel." And so the medium goes to work, and she summons the spirit of the prophet Samuel, and he comes up out of the ground, which is where Sheol was depicted as being in the Hebrew imagination. So Samuel, he's a righteous man, he's a prophet, but he's understood as living in Sheol, in separation from God, who's up in heaven. And so because the souls of the righteous, humans, were understood prior to the time of Christ as being in Sheol, it didn't really occur to people to ask them to intercede with God for them, because they weren't with God at this point. After Jesus came and entered heaven and opened heaven to the saints, it became more natural to ask human saints to intercede with God, because now they were with God. And it's, oh, if there's a saint and he's with God, oh yeah, I want him to pray for me. And so that practice really got rolling in the Christian age. However, there was an idea that you could, under at least special circumstances, you could talk to saints. Now, what Saul was doing was wrong. And by the way, it is Samuel that Saul is talking to. The biblical author says Saul knew it was Samuel, and know is a factitive verb that means it's really Samuel. It's a fact that this is Samuel. Also, the book of Sirach confirms that it was Samuel and says he prophesied to the king even from the grave. So we have double confirmation this is Samuel. But Saul shouldn't have used a medium. But there were other circumstances in which one could talk to a departed human saint. We see an example of that in the pre-Christian Jewish book of Second Maccabees, which is in the Catholic Bible. It's not in the Protestant Bible, but it is in the Catholic Bible, and it is pre-Christian and Jewish. So this reflects what, at least some Jews understood to be the case before the time of Christ. And in 2nd Maccabees, Judah Maccabee receives a vision of the deceased high priest Onias and the deceased prophet Jeremiah, and they interact with Judah in the dream. So we see, at least in this circumstance, it was fine for Judah to interact with the souls of these two departed saints in his vision, and it's presented as a good thing by the author of 2nd Maccabees. So even though we don't have a practice that's established of asking human saints to intercede for you, we do have indications that it was understood in the Jewish community that it can be fine to interact with human saints. When it comes to angelic saints, so these are holy angels. They're angels who are also saints. Saint just means holy. So holy angels are also saints. There's a bit more of a basis. Not so much an established practice, but we do see instances where angels make contact with people, and the people make requests of the angels, which then get passed on to God. And we also see that in the New Testament. In fact, in the New Testament, if you look in the book of Revelation, John sees the scene of God's throne room in heaven, and around the throne of God, he sees both humans and angels, and he sees he refers to them as the 24 elders, and they appear to be the leaders of the people of God in heaven, and they're worshiping God and offering incense to God. And John tells us that the incense that they're offering is the prayers of the saints. And normally in this period, the term saint was used for living human saints down on earth. And so what this passage shows is heavenly saints, the 24 elders, offering to God the prayers of saints who are down on earth. And so we see them interceding for us. We also see a few chapters later the same thing with an angelic saint. An angel goes to the altar of God in heaven, and he's got a censer, and he offers incense to God, and John tells us that the incense is mingled with the prayers of the saints. So here we see an angel interceding for living human saints. And if humans and angels in heaven are interceding for us, it's not wrong to ask them for their intercession. And so all that's very early evidence. We also see it very clearly in the writings of the Church Fathers. We have a tract at Catholic.com on the Church Fathers and praying to the saints that gives many quotations from the early centuries. And so I'd also suggest taking a look at that.
Indeed. Thank you, Blake. We appreciate you calling in today. Great question and a great answer there from Jimmy. Let's take our final break of the second hour. It is an open forum with Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, Ben, Marianne, Vincent, and Chris. Hang on the line. We'll try to get to you here before the top of the hour. We'll be right back after this.
Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Do you love sharing the gospel and want to learn to be more effective? Join the St. Paul Street Evangelization online School of Evangelization. You will learn to build bridges of trust and make disciples by befriending strangers, proclaiming the gospel, inviting people to the church, and praying with others. We'll ask for a pledge of financial support, but if you are unable to give, we'll give you a membership at no cost. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Faith is a precious gift from God. As the largest religious media network in the world, EWTN has an important role in educating others about our Catholic faith and spreading the good news of salvation. We invite you to explore our numerous pages of historical faith documents, prayers, teachings, and other current issues in Catholicism today. Visit EWTN.com and click Catholicism. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson sitting in for CALive today, and we have, of course, our guest here Thursday afternoon, second hour, Jimmy Akin, Open Forum. Of course, Jimmy is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. With our limited time left, let's get right back to the phones. We're going to go to Ben in San Diego, listening on Real Presence Radio. Ben, go right ahead.
Hi. So I had a question kind of concerning relativism, moral relativism. So I have a lot of conversations with my friends at school about different things, topics in morality and stuff like that. And like last week we were having a conversation about like the existence of souls. And we'll be having this conversation, and someone will be like, it doesn't really matter, you can both just believe whatever you want to believe and we can keep on going or whatever. And it's really hard because it stops the conversation and we can't find the truth. So how do you kind of combat that, to get past that, so you can continue to get to the root of the question and, so combat relativism and then continue the conversation?
Well, I think that there are, I mean, it depends on what the person has said. Based on what you just said, it didn't really sound like they were advocating relativism. They just said, well, you can believe what you think, but let's move on. And I would take that as a signal that they just don't want to talk about this right now. And so I wouldn't try to force people to talk about something that they don't want to talk about. There's not an obligation that we have to talk about whatever someone else wants us to. And there are times in life where it's reasonable to say, I don't think we're going to agree on this. Let's move on and deal with something else. And that's perfectly fine. If they say something more than that, like if they're saying, well, everybody's opinions are equal, which would be a kind of relativism, I would say, I'd ask a question and say, really? What do you mean by that? Because if you mean everyone's opinions are equal in the sense that we all have a right to our opinions, well, okay, I can agree with that. We do all have a right to our opinions. But if you mean none of them are true, or none of them are more true than others, well, that's not accurate. And it would be fairly easy at that point to point to some examples. The examples I would point to would depend on who your friends are. But if let's say they're a zoologist, okay, I would say, if would you as a zoologist say that dogs have 5 legs under ordinary states of affairs? And what would you think of someone who held the opinion that dogs have 5 legs? Well, presumably they'd acknowledge that under ordinary circumstances, dogs don't have 5 legs. And so some opinions are clearly more truthful than others, more accurate than others. And you could, configure a number of examples like that to illustrate that not all opinions are equally true. And since we have ways of establishing which opinions are true, like let's go look at some dogs. Hey, counting their legs, most of them don't have 5. It also illustrates that not only are some opinions true, but we can figure out which opinions are true, at least much of the time. If, on the other hand, they're dealing with moral issues and saying that all moral opinions are equal or equally valid, I would go to their morality, the morality of the friend, and say, like, for example, these days, one of the big concerns that a lot of people, including a lot of younger people, have is about racism, treating people of other races unfairly. And there's a lot of passion on that subject today, particularly among young people, because young people tend to be more passionate about a lot of stuff. And so in talking to your friends, if they're opposed to racism, and I hope they are, because they should be opposed to racism, but I would say to them, so if you say everyone's moral opinions are equal, does that apply in this area? Would you say that a Ku Klux Klan member's opinion about race is just as valid as yours? And if they say, well, no, I wouldn't because he's a racist, well, then good. You've agreed that racism is a bad thing and not all opinions are equal. And this is a moral matter. So not all opinions about morality are good. So I think it is possible to have conversations that advance further. If someone just doesn't want to talk about it, about a subject, I would let it drop, at least under most circumstances. I don't want to force conversations on people who don't want to have them because they'll just resent you and they won't really be convinced. They have to want to talk about something in order to have good results. But if they are interested in talking about something and they're still maintaining some kind of moral relativism, whether it's about values or matters of fact in general, I would find some things that they would agree with and use those as illustrations where they would say, no, I don't think opposing opinions are equally valid. And that's one way of dealing with moral or factual relativism.
Hey, Ben, hang on the line. Edgar, our call screener, he is going to take your information. We have a brand new book coming out from Catholic Answers Press, authored by Carlo Broussard, called The New Relativism. It's coming out any day, and since this is on your mind, it's a really big deal in a lot of conversations. Hang on, and as soon as that book comes out, Edgar will send it out to you, okay?
Thank you.
You bet. All right. Thanks for calling in, Ben. Let's roll right on to Marianne on line 3 in Camino, California. Marianne's listening on Sirius XM Radio. Go right ahead, Marianne.
Hi there.
Hi.
Thank you, both of you. I have a question for Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm assuming. Have you heard of Calvin Robinson?
Yeah, I've seen his picture, but I don't really know a lot about him.
Well, I don't know a lot about him, but I got it. Like, my nephew sent a wonderful speech he was giving, and he sounded like a Catholic to me. I thought he was Catholic except for his accent. And so he is a wonderful guy. I think he's the Church of England. I just wondered. I am a Catholic, so he said something to the effect like he's silly, and he has a lot of friends, and he said, my papist friends, let me tell you that the Church of England is the established church. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so weird because not only does he really seem like someday he might be Catholic, I don't know, but he was actually kicked out of the diaconate in the Church of England because of his very conservative views, good views. And I don't know what he means by that because I just think it's so easy
you're asking about the term established church, is that correct?
The what?
You're asking about the term established church and what that means. Is that correct?
Yes, because I know what happened.
So we're getting right down to the end of the hour. So I need to give you an answer, or we'll run out of time. So you're right. He doesn't sound like he's a Catholic if he's using terms like my papist friends, because the term papist was introduced back after the Reformation by Anglicans as a way of running down Catholics. So it was originally an insult term for Catholics. But if he's joking, he may not mean it as an insult. When he says the established church, he is referring to the Church of England. And what established means in this case is it's established by the British government. So after the British Reformation, Henry VIII, basically dethroned the Catholic bishops and established the Anglican Church. So established church means a church that's been established by the British state, by Parliament and so forth. And so that's what he's referring to. The concept of an established church, some states have established church, some nations do. Here in America, we don't. And so the concept of an established church doesn't mean as much to us.
Marianne, thank you for calling in today. We appreciate that. Vincent, sorry we did not get to you here this afternoon. Give us a call back another time. Tomorrow, got a couple more great hours for you. Trent Horn, Why Are You Pro-Choice, is in Hour 1. Monsignor Eugene Morris, Hour 2. Ask a Priest. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching today. We appreciate you being a part of our efforts. God bless you. Pray for us. We'll pray for you. Have a great night.